Hi, I'm Charlie Oliver, founder and CEO of Tech 2025. Catch me this week on the Jesse T Show.
Charlie Oliver, welcome to the Jesse T Show.
Hey, Jesse, thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
I know, it's great to have you here. And we were connected through Paul Spires, a gentleman who we both love, and he's doing great things in the world. And before we jump into kind of that connection, I want to just, again, apologize because when I saw the name Charlie, I assumed that you were a gentleman. And I was like, hey, brother, great to connect. And you're like, I'm a woman. And I'm like, shit.
I have to tell you, the expressions and the comments that I've gotten from men over the years who have experienced the same thing have made having a boy's name, quote unquote, worth it. Because I let you guys squirm for a minute and then I go, okay, it's all right. It's all good.
It was all love, girl. And, you know, I grew up with more of a feminine name. Jesse Lee isn't a super masculine name. I guess it is in certain parts of the world, but so it was the flip flop. You had the more masculine name. I had the more feminine name, but it's been beautiful. And I've owned it later in life. But in the beginning of life, it was really kind of weird.
It's weird today. That's why it takes on an entirely different connotation today, because if you say the wrong thing to the wrong person, use the wrong pronoun at the wrong time and the wrong day, it can ruin your career, right? So it's almost, that's why I just say it's all good. It's always been all good. I know who I am. Okay.
You're the mighty, the powerful Charlie Oliver. Tell us a little bit about your who you are and your journey. Give us some context as to what you do.
Okay, so I am Charlie Oliver, the founder and CEO of Tech 2025, which is a community and a platform that helps individuals and companies to prepare for the future, the technological future. We focus on emerging technologies like AI, machine learning, 3D printing, XR, all that good stuff. We launched in 2017, initially as an offshoot of my second company, which is called Surfresh Media, which is a digital media strategy agency. And there we focused on technologies too, but through more so social media. So we launched back in 2009, 8, 9. And so we were introducing a lot of the big tech companies, believe it or not, our clients, to sort of the power of social media, right? So the cornerstone of the foundation of my work throughout my years and up into Tech 2025 is about it's about communication, first of all, right? And the tools that you use to communicate effectively. In my case, technologies. So with companies, we help them, especially now more than ever, we help them with employee engagement, employee learning, continuous learning, upskilling, reskilling, but we do it a little differently. We don't focus on the technical aspect of learning about these technologies. We focus on what we call the power skills, the crucial skills, the critical thinking, understanding the implications of these technologies, asking the hard questions like, yeah, we're going to have AI, but at what costs, right? Trying to mitigate the disasters that we've seen, over the past just couple of years as companies have rolled out these technologies. So we specialize in that. I love it. And as an entrepreneur, I've had the privilege of being able to learn from not just my clients, but just our audience, because I'm always doing live events. I'm always talking to people. I always want to know what you think. I've had the privilege of being able to learn from an incredible network of people. So you're one of them now, Jesse.
Speaking about
Don't let me down.
I know. There's a lot to your network that we can connect on a little bit, but like going back to how we were connected through Paul Spires, this guy is an amazing human being, and he saw fit to plug us in together. He's got a great podcast, The New Principles of the P&L, or the New P&L Leadership Principles. I'm butchering the name. Yeah. And he's got a voice made for podcasting. He's got a beautiful face. He's got the golden voice.
I interviewed him. By the way, Paul is one of these people who, and if he watches this, he's probably going to blush. But Paul is one of these people who, when you talk about him, everybody who talks about Paul, they all say the same thing. It's like, oh, he's so awesome. He's great. And it's true. He's just a really great guy. And it's so funny because when we initially talked before this podcast, you mentioned to me, I told you how, Paul has been great just in the little bit of time that I've known him. So helpful, so supportive, thought-provoking. And you said, yeah, he's just a beautiful soul. And I thought to myself, wow, that's an amazing compliment. Like, I don't know if anyone's ever called me a beautiful soul, but I have to agree with you on that one. And the other thing is when I interviewed Paul on our podcast, Fast Forward, which is our Tech 2025 podcast, a lot of times we record it and then I edit it, or I'll take a run on the edit myself because I'm so anal and I'm so like, I listened to his voice in my ear and I was like, wow, this is incredible. What a voice, right?
Silky, smooth, sultry, powerful. It's just like the perfect voice for podcasting.
Perfect.
I'm so jealous.
Also, I am too, right? And I'm a girl. And he's also got the accent thing because he's from New Zealand. So anyway, yeah.
How did y'all plug in together?
It's the power of connecting through social media. I think what happened, and this has been a few months now, is that he reached out to me. I don't know if somehow we're connected in each other's network, but he asked me, would you like to be on the podcast? And I said, well, let me listen to a few episodes, and make sure it's my thing. And I have to be 100% real with you, as I always would be. I was blown away by his podcast. I was blown away by, it was an immediate yes for me. I listened to several episodes and like you said, it's principles and leadership, right? And it's really easy to sort of throw those words around and you hear them a lot and there's no substance to them anymore, at least the way it's spoken about in context these days. I think people are struggling with that. But when I listen to his podcast, I'm like, wow, this is what we need. And I was struck by how, because I'm a podcaster, I listen to I've subscribed to hundreds of them, like you probably, going back years. Like I've been listening since 2009, 8, and I was struck by how, although I was trying to listen passively, like I usually do, because I'm doing other things in the house, how substantive the conversation was that he has with his guests that made me stop and go, oh, that's good. That's really good. So if I do that several times within one episode, much less across several episodes, you've got something special. So I think he has something special. And then when I got back to him, I was like, yeah, I'll do it. And then he asked me questions, which were very thoughtful. So I did an episode with him and the questions he asked me really made me go, wow, I've got to think about this.
Get into that deeper layer of context and just getting people to really go deep and provide. And it really just, honestly, it makes the guest look really good because they have so much expertise. A lot of times they're always kind of like surface with a lot of things they're doing that, like when you have to dig a little bit deeper, you shine brighter,
I couldn't agree more. And even with our guests at the think tanks that we do, because we're known at Tech 2025 for our think tanks. And that's where we'll bring in an expert. I know a lot of people in my network, and a lot of these people are either developers of the technology or they use them in their office. They're leaders who are, the first thing I say to them is, you cannot give the presentation that you've been given, the high level sort of here I am, 20-minute presentation. I want us to really think about the problems that we are asking our audience to solve in this think tank and create an experience specifically around that problem. And almost every guest that I've had has been sort of surprised by that, right? Because you remember events back in the old days before the pandemic when you just go and, talk for a few minutes and then, talk to a few people and you're out. You can't do that at our events. But they like that. And and a lot of times it would lead us to have these really in-depth conversations for like an hour and sometimes a lot longer about the topic. And it just it would make us both realize, myself and the guests, how much we need to have these conversations and how little we know about what we are experts in, right? So
yeah, it's interesting that you don't realize, you know, the work that you've put in, the years that you've done this, and we'll get into that in a moment, but just as far as, a lot of times you're so in the weeds that you don't pay attention to like how much you actually have to offer. Like a lot of times you're like, it's so status quo for you, but like to somebody else who may not have that information that you have, like it's so powerful for people to hear what you've done. And so, I want to talk about your journey and how you got into tech and how you got into what you're doing today. And there's some nuggets along the way with like being mentored or working with Neil deGrasse Tyson we could talk about. But really what I want to ask for the listeners, as a woman in tech, right? Like what has that experience been like for you? Because I know for a long time, tide's turning a little bit, but for a long time, it was like a male dominated industry. And it was very, centered around like Silicon Valley, and like now you have different places like Austin that's come up over the years through South by Southwest, and like there's pockets and there's silos. It feels like. How did you break into tech, and like what have you seen change in terms of the landscape since you've been there?
That's a great question. And to your point about there being pockets, I think, everyone's different. You have to appreciate people's in your own individuality, right?
Sure.
You have to recognize whether you're a man or woman, whatever, you have to recognize what your value proposition is and know that that transcends everything, right? It doesn't matter what you are, whatever, if you know your value proposition, you'll know how to roll, right? That's the thing. So I never have led in my life and in my mind with the idea that I'm less than because of. I have always led with, this is who I am, this is what I have to offer, what's good, right? Like, and what's your offering? What do you have? I've never assumed that the group that I'm moving into or where I'm going, that I might, of course, that I might not fit in, but I never lead with that assumption. But to your point, you have to find your pocket too, right? It helps to find where you fit in. When I came into tech, it was actually 2007. So Facebook had just launched.
Wow.
Twitter's, yes. Listen, and it was tech in New York City. So you mentioned Silicon Valley. Silicon Alley was a whole different ballgame, right? It was literally everyone in tech in New York could fit in the palm of my hand.
Wow.
And I was one of them. And so, and even then, you think now it's very much more diverse and it's huge, one of the biggest tech communities in the world. Back then, it was even more stark that I was one of only several Black people. Forget about women, but just people. And so, again, it was a fun time, though. It was a fun time because it was such a small community, and we didn't rely on the culture of Silicon Valley.
Right.
To define who we are, right? Especially being New Yorkers, and especially someone like me. I'm a native New Yorker. I'm from Brooklyn, so I really roll. I like what? You know what I mean? Like
you roll deep with the New York vibe,
Yeah, like I'm gonna try to be like Silicon Valley bros. I don't think so. So that was, dude, whatever. So that was kind of my vibe. But even, and the beauty of that, and I think where that equates to the pandemic and everything moving forward is that and why I have always looked for the edge, things that are at the edge that are just about to pop off.
The bleeding edge.
The leading edge. If you walk into a culture that's already very well established, that culture tells you who and what you are, regardless, right? Regardless of what you do or who you are, whether you're a man or woman. If you walk into something that's not yet established, where everyone's just kind of like trying to figure it out, you get to co-define that.
Yeah.
You get to really contribute to that, and you won't get as much pushback, if any at all. So that's why, for me as a woman, just in life, I've always been attracted to what's next. So when I came into tech in 2007, I was coming from the entertainment industry and from law firms. And I decided in entertainment industry, where I worked in TV and film, and you want to talk about women having it kind of difficult back then in TV film, it was still very difficult for women. And I worked in the room with writers, executive producers. When I say in the room, I mean on TV shows, on sitcoms. And those rooms are notoriously white, male, older, primarily Harvard. This was back in the day. And so doing that, and then segueing into tech, it was like, oh, this is great. I can do whatever. I can be whatever I can, So anyway, it's been quite a journey. But I think the thing that has led me the most, right, and has helped me, even when it has been very difficult, being the only woman or the only Black woman or whatever, has been that I don't wait for other people to define my value proposition. And that doesn't mean that I can't refine that proposition based on what other people contribute to my knowledge. That's important, but you have to walk in understanding what your value is.
Yes.
Or you'll be trampled over, And so when I mentor younger women, I just tell them that, and it's not easy when you're young. It's hard. I think I was a little arrogant. That helped.
A little bit of that,
Brooklyn.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Boston boy. I grew up in Boston, so I get it. I get the Northeast swagger, and just kind of like that chip on your shoulder, like you're not gonna, I'll show you kind of thing,
When I moved to LA, I kid you not. See, this is why we get along. When I moved to LA, at that time, again, it was a different time. I kid you not, all of the producers and everyone I worked with, they were like, "Where are you from? You're from Brooklyn." Like they could hear the accent. It was very thick back then. I was much younger, but it's very thick. And that attitude, a lot of them loved it. They were just like, they loved having me in the room, in the writer's room, because when they, do their run on a script, on the scene, yeah, we're going to do this and do that and do that and put this in and put that in. They would turn to me, for example, and say, "Charlie, what'd you think of that?" Now I could have sat there and gone, "It's great, yay," or "What do they want to hear? Let me tell them so that I don't piss anyone off." But the Brooklyn in me is like, "Dude, what are you doing?" Like didn't work for me.
It's so funny. Yeah, it's interesting. I came down to after the military, I came down to Georgia in 2006, and my Boston accent was very thick, and my kind of way of being was very Boston. And when I came down to Georgia, I got into an outside sales company, going door to door, cold call, commission. So I was seeing 80 to 100 businesses every day, walking in with this thick Boston accent, selling things. And it was really interesting because, much like you, most people, it's a melting pot in certain spots of Atlanta, but for the most part, there's a lot of just Southern people that are from Georgia and they're from here. And so when I would come into each door and I was pitching whatever it was I was selling, they hear this accent and they have this kind of energy that they're not used to. And like you said, 9 times out of 10, people loved it. People they wanted, it was different. They wanted to hear something different. But I look back on it now and I hear accents from Boston. And it slightly makes me cringe. I'm like, shit, I used to sound like that. Because sometimes it's really thick. It's like, "Hey, Harvard," or just, it's really thick. And it's like,
but it hasn't gone away. You still have it.
It's muted for sure. And it comes out during certain situations. Like if there's a Boston sporting event on, we'll be standing up yelling at the TV because that's what we do. And then also if there's an adult beverage involved, it comes out a little bit more.
Yeah, I always say, if you want to hear the Brooklyn in me, just piss me off.
Yeah.
Piss me off or owe me money and you'll hear it.
Right. Yeah. The Brooklyn comes out. So when you got into tech, what was the journey like compared to what you're doing now?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that the journey, well, let me just start with, I was younger, much younger. A lot of time has passed. 10 years is not that long. It's actually been 11 years, I think. But anyway, it's not that long, but there's a lot of growth that happens in a decade in your life.
For sure. Hopefully.
Yeah. I hope, if you're doing things right. So in that time, I have to tell you that arrogance that I spoke about, and I realize that that's also a distinctly American thing. We're pretty arrogant and optimistic, and I can do anything. I've got this, right? When I got into tech and decided, I'm going to be an entrepreneur, it never occurred to me that I could fail. Never even occurred to me. I just thought, well, hell, I've rocked this thing that I do in my other worlds, right? Working in entertainment or corporate law or whatever, I rocked that. So I could do this, and it's just a piece of cake, right? And so when I got into tech and I launched my first startup, I just had this unbelievable arrogance and belief that it's a piece of cake. It's gonna work. It's gonna all be good. It won't be easy, but it'll happen. And and it was easy to do. It was easy to do something back then. And some would argue it's easier now because we have more tools and we need more ideas. But back then, that arrogance served me for a moment, and then I got my butt kicked a lot. And there were no support systems back then. I think now there are more support systems for women and minorities, especially. Let's be honest, there are plenty of support systems for white men. Not a horrible thing at all. I'm not, saying that's terrible. Everybody needs their support system, but certainly back then, if you were a woman, Black woman, whatever, there were no support systems. It was hard to be heard. I still managed to get my voice out there and get support, but I think I fell harder and my fail was longer because I didn't have it. And we should remember, as you said before, that back then, especially, the power and the culture in tech was centralized still in Silicon Valley. So that culture still dominated, right? Even though we were fighting in New York to sort of do our own thing. And the rest of the world, was still trying to figure out what the hell was going on. So now, fast forward, the past 10 years, it's been quite a ride. I don't think anyone, and you probably can tell the same story, right? I don't think anyone who's been in tech in 10 years can tell you that this has been anything other than phenomenal. I talk to people now that I've known since day one in tech, and we just can't believe it. I mean, just even in 5 years, right? Look at what's happened in 4 years. All I can say is I'm still here. I'm thankful.
Talk about your journey a little bit, where you had the chance to work with, at least maybe in a mentor mentee kind of role, even if it was kind of like partial with Neil. How did that happen?
Neil Tyson.
Yeah.
So this was a long time ago. This is so my first love, believe it or not, is astrophysics, is science. I love, most people don't know that. Well, people close to me do. And, I was on a plane one day and I saw an article about him. I didn't know anything about him, and I'm traveling or whatever. And he had just redesigned the Hayden Planetarium. And I was fascinated because I thought, whoa, this Black astrophysicist is redesigning the Hayden Planetarium. I was fascinated. So I decided to go to the planetarium to see what it was all about. I have this natural curiosity that carries you a long way too, just to not have it, right? Don't just have the curiosity, but follow it through.
Yes.
On that plane, reading that magazine about Neil Tyson, I was enthralled because I said, oh, it's fun. I dog-eared that magazine, go to show you how long ago it was. We didn't even have social media. And then when I got back to New York, I went to the Hayden Planetarium, and I decided that I wanted to go back to school for astrophysics. And Neil, the Hayden Planetarium was a part of a program, or co-ran a program with NASA to bring people of color, minorities into space science, as they called it. And I was very lucky. I was the first student in that program. And because of that, I was brought into the fold. I worked with Neil in his office. He definitely mentored us, the first small group. There was maybe like 8 of us. It was really kind of maybe a little sad, but it was good. I got a chance to see him. He had just started to sort of begin to get fame, right? By that time, he was already the sexiest astrophysicist according to People magazine, but he hadn't really achieved global fame outside of the science community the way he has today. So I did get to sort of see how he thinks and how he operates, and within the science community, right, what his center of gravity does to people around him, which is really quite profound when you watch that, when you can just watch that process. So yeah.
What was that like in terms of some of I know you had at least one life-changing moment in conversation where he gave you some insight, and how did that change your trajectory in your career and in your life? In my opinion, and again, I'm not pretending to know Neil deGrasse Tyson, his soul, and by any means. But from my observations of Neil back then, and I was much younger, he is very thoughtful, and curious, as you know, very, very curious. When you talk to him, even at a public event, you raise your hand and you ask him a question. Oh, Dr. Tyson, I want to know, da, da, da. You can see him thinking about what you're saying. He's not just listening, he's thinking about what you're saying. So I was in one of his classes, and I had an insecurity that I could not shake for anything, which I think a lot of people may have, which is that I was trying to go back to school for astrophysics at an age where the industry says, oh, you're too old, right? We want 18-year-olds coming out of high school. That's the prime is in your young 20s. You have your PhD. But now I wasn't trying to get my PhD, but by the time you're in your late 20s, you've already graduated. So my insecurity was that
even though I was young. I mean, I wasn't even 31. I felt like I was too old. I
Yeah.
couldn't contribute, right? Like, look at these young whippersnappers. I can't do it. And I felt a little bitter too, because I felt like Neil Tyson was someone who was nurtured in what he loved to do from the time he was a child, right? And that's part of his greatness. That's part of what made him great. His parents, nurtured him in that. When I was a little girl and I loved science, no one did that. And when I was advanced in math, they didn't do that. So not back then. So anyway, I said to Neil, he asked me in class one day, he asked everyone, why are you here? What is it that you hope to get out of this program, whatever? And when I said what I had to say, he said, I'll never forget, he says, wow, in other words, I'm paraphrasing here, but he basically said, I'm blown away by what you said. I'm inspired by you. And I said, why? What do you mean? And he was like, well, you're coming into this at an age and in a way that is so valuable. And I said to him, well, I think you're the one. I want to be you, because and he says, no. I already know this stuff. I'm learning just like you, but I already know this stuff. You come at this with a newness of thinking and in a way of thinking with a life's experience that we desperately need. So you have to value that. Yeah. So from that moment on, believe it or not, I learned to value even more the uniqueness of my experience, regardless of my insecurities in that moment. If I can value the uniqueness of my experience, I may not know what everyone's talking about, but the life experience that you have, it's valuable.
Incredible how someone that you admire, that you look up to, that's a good human being, can reframe your whole paradigm and just
I love that. Reframe your whole paradigm. You should write a book about that. Reframe your whole paradigm.
We could co-author it together. And that's such an incredible, impactful moment for you, because it took pressure off. You're looking at people that may be 5-10 years younger than you in this thing, and you're like, well, I'm a little bit older, but then you realize that's a strength. Life experience is an absolute strength.
Yeah.
Like, are you going to go with the life coach that's 18 or the life coach that's 50, 60, depending on what they do? Most likely it's probably going to be the one that has more experience,
Right. And it's so funny how I think a lot of times, and I try to be mindful of this when I mentor younger people, right? Is that sometimes in life, all we need is permission to be who we are.
Yep.
Right. Ideally, you own that permission growing up, but we all know that that's not the case. By the time you come out and you're in your 20s, you're told so many different things about what you're supposed to be and what you should be. You just really need to understand you have permission to be exactly who you are, and it is of value. And I think that's what the pandemic has done for so many people. If I could put it in that way, I hope I'm not, I don't mean to say that the pandemic was good. I'm just saying it gave people permission to push back and to be who they are.
Of course. And for me, I'm 39, but it took me until my early 30s to get to a point where I started really stepping into my own and like this is who I am and I love who I am. This is an ongoing thing. It's never perfect. We have 60 to 90,000 thoughts a day, and most of them, 80% of them are negative.
Wait, 60 to 90,000 thoughts?
Yeah. The average person has 60, but goes up to 90. So 60 to 90,000 thoughts per day. And 80% of those are self-sabotaging, negative, talking crap to yourself. It's subconscious too. So it's you have to get into different brainwave states to be able to even train yourself out of that. And people don't realize that. And it's I had this conversation, and I've said it a few times on the podcast, but a couple of months ago, I called myself a motherfucker, and I said it out loud, in my mind. I was like, you motherfucker. And I'm like,
who said that? You're ready to fight.
I was like, if anyone else ever called me a motherfucker, I wouldn't let that slide. I'm not going to Boston them and beat them up, but I'm still not going to want to talk to this person. Right. And I was like, why would I do that to myself? So I had to reframe my own paradigm, my own way of thinking of don't talk to yourself like that. Talk to yourself with love. And there's this really beautiful book, and he comes from the Silicon Valley as well. I forget it's Ramit or Ravit, but it's called Love Yourself.
Oh, I know.
Yeah. Love yourself like your life depends on it.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful book. And it's basically when's the last time you looked in the mirror and told yourself you loved yourself? Most people don't do that. Most people don't look at themselves and say, I love you, Jesse. It seems weird because we were never taught and we don't practice it. Yeah. But the whole book, it's a beautiful, on Audible, I think it's a 4-hour listen. It's super quick. And in 30 days, you can go from a place where you're not happy about your life and you're down and out to you have magic in your life in 30 days by just doing a 7-minute a day meditation and telling yourself you love yourself. Separate from that, you can change your whole life. It's incredible.
It's doable. It's doable. And let me ask you a question, if you don't mind. I know you're
Yeah.
asking me questions, but regarding that book and the whole meditation process and sort of finding a method of meditation that works for you, right?
Yes.
What would you advise people to do? Because that's something that I've always struggled with. I mean, I do it, but it's like, getting started in that is
Yeah.
all.
I got something. So let me real quick. So Love Yourself Like Your Life Depends on It's Kamal Ravikant. And he was a entrepreneur CEO, had a big company and it failed and he was depressed. And basically he came up with this whole process to get himself out of that. Now, for anyone who wants to meditate, all you need is 5 to 10 minutes a day, but you got to make it a practice. You got to build it into your schedule. So the best time to do it is right when you wake up. So as soon as you wake up, do nothing else. Definitely don't get on your phone. Don't start hitting social media and start seeing people's lives where they're like putting out their best lives and it's making you feel depressed. And you're like, oh, I don't have that kind of life. Like just don't touch your phone when you wake up. Walk into the darkest place that you can, your closet or somewhere off to the side, and just sit down. Sit down, get a little meditation pillow or just another pillow. Like if you have a couple pillows, sit down on your butt and just breathe and put your attention on your heart. And so you're in a different brainwave state. So you're more suggestible. This is where you can train the subconscious mind. And you're sitting down and you get your hand on your heart if you choose, and you're just letting things flow through you and think about your heart. And as things will come up, thoughts, ideas. The idea isn't in meditation. The idea is not to not think about nothing. The idea is just to be. And if you do this every day for a month, give it 30 days, you will realize how much clarity and power and focus you have based on the ability just to sit in stillness and see what comes up for you. Because most people don't stop. Most people go from when they wake up to when they go to sleep, consume, do, and then they give themselves no space to listen. And it opens up so much in your life. Like if you were to do this, even for like 7 days straight, you would see how you think differently and how you feel differently and how you approach things differently, because you're able to build margin. There's the book, I think it's called Margin, but basically you're able to build breathing room. And most people don't do this for themselves. So 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, wake up, first thing you do, go sit down, listen, see what comes up for you. If you want, journal it afterwards, write it down, see what came up for you. If there's things that are coming up for you, like maybe shame or guilt or success or happiness, like whatever it is, write it down. And then you can kind of start to tease that out and see what that means for you.
I couldn't agree more.
Simple.
It's funny because the
simple
voice,
but not easy.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why we don't do it, right? It's
Yeah.
we'd all be doing it. But I find also that by doing that, and this is why I love to wake up at 5 in the morning. Like I wake up at something, honestly, nowadays I wake up at 4:30 in the morning, which is maddening in some ways but I've learned to embrace that too. If it's
What time
4:30,
do you go to bed?
like 11, which
You're
is
getting 5.5, 6 hours, depending. Yeah.
yeah, 5.5, 6 hours. I might go to sleep a little later, but no matter what time I go to sleep, I'm up at 4:30. And here's what I learned about sleep. And this is just, of course, the science of sleep is ongoing and new research coming all the time. So apparently, I forget who this person is. He's a researcher. I'm terrible with names. I'm so sorry. But apparently, especially as we get older, they say we need less sleep, but apparently, no, we do still need something like, he said something like 9 hours of sleep or 8 hours of sleep. And the interviewer, this was on a podcast, said, "What? How could you? I can't sleep that long. It can, 8 hours." He says, "Not consecutively.
Right.
You don't need 8 hours consecutively. You can do 4 hours in the middle of the night, a nap during the day, power nap here, this and that. Yeah." And so that's really, really helpful to know. So I don't stress myself anymore about not being able to sleep. But when I wake up in the morning and I meditate and I embrace the silence, which is really important for me. I love that. I realize also that I can hear the positive voice of reinforcement in myself more.
Beautiful.
Especially when I'm asleep or going to sleep, I hear myself say things to me, that's reinforced, believe it or not. And it sounds crazy, but it is. And I attribute that to meditation, because we do have those negative thoughts, like you said. But if you're doing something that trains your mind to focus on not reacting to that and on signs, it does help a lot for me. And I journal too. Do you journal?
I do, yeah. I haven't done it in a little bit, but when I was doing it, it was incredible what was like showing up in my life.
How do you, so how do you, I'll tell you how I journal, but how
Tell
do you,
me, tell us how you journal.
oh my God. Okay. Inconsistently, number one. I know I try to make it sound like I'm a journal badass. No, 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 no. I have a stack of journals. I'm one of these people who I buy beautiful books, beautiful journals. I have my whole life, whenever I've traveled anywhere in the world, I make a point of buying a journal that's
Yes.
gorgeous. And then I'll write on the first page, like dutifully, like Charlie Oliver, like I'm first page, and that's it. Okay. That's the whole, that's a, but and it'll sit next to my bed, and the journal will be looking at me for like months and months, going, "Are you just like you're gonna pick me up again?" But here's the thing: I do still journal. I just feel like I do it when I feel like I need to. But there's a lot to be said for doing it consistently. So please don't follow what I do. Just don't do as I say. But I used to journal. Guess what? I used to journal constantly in my 20s. I didn't realize how much I journaled in my 20s. And here's why I think journaling is so powerful. I went to my storage space a year ago to clean it out. I had it for years. So I had stuff in there from when I was in my 20s, believe it or not, and younger actually. So when I went and I brought the stuff back, I went through it and I found journals from when I was in my 20s. And I didn't realize how much I journaled. I had like 8 journals from my 20s, right? And I began, and I dare you to do this if you journal. I began to read them. So this is me being reintroduced to 20-something-year-old Charlie.
Time machine.
Time machine. And let me tell you something. That girl was a bit of an asshole. Okay.
Perspective.
Perspective. I'm flipping the pages in a lot of ways. I was the typical 20-year-old in terms of, in your 20s, everything is a big deal. Everything is like, oh my God, life, and everyone who comes across your path, you almost give equal weight to, with regards to your energy and your soul and everything. And it isn't until you get older that you learn how to navigate that far more, how to protect what you have more.
Right.
Because I was reading pages in my journal going, who's this guy I was crying about? Well, who? Right? I'm like, oh, I love him more than that. I'm like, ooh. So it's cathartic when you look back and you realize that you really do completely change in a lot of ways who you are every several years. And it's valid. So save those journals too.
As you were talking, I got my journal, and it's so meditate when you wake up, and journal if you can after meditation would be a good practice for people. And my journal that I've been using, it's similar, where it says like my name, my phone number, and then on the first page it says journaling is incredible for remembering what's important. And that's just like it's obvious, but it's like, this is why you're doing this, to remember what's
right.
Important. And what I've done in here is I've put poetry in here, and I've done a lot of my like psychedelic journeys.
Oh, nice.
Where I come back with new information. I try to put it all down in here. So this is my journal that I've been using for the last year or so. But
do you have a dream journal? I have a dream journal.
No, I don't, but
really,
I understand where most of my dreams, a lot of my dreams personally, I've noticed, come from thoughts or ideas that I've had earlier in the day that I've forgotten about. So it's my subconscious coming back up. So it's like, let's say I was thinking about this beautiful woman, right? And, just a name, Janelle. So Janelle, I thought about Janelle, and she's, in my mind. And all of a sudden I forgot about that throughout the day because I went about my life. And then as I'm sleeping, I think about, she pops up in my mind again. That's a lot of my dreams come from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
How about you?
A lot of my dreams that I write down are more of that, of course, right? A lot of what we're processing. As well. And I used to have anxieties bad. I used to actually have anxiety attacks, in my sleep and everything. And so I learned how to manage those. But also I find that a lot of my dreams are, now hear me out, when I say prophetic, I don't mean that I'm necessarily seeing the future and oh my God. I just think that we have intentionality and an understanding of what's happening around us, um, subconsciously in a way that we're not aware of consciously, right? And so what happens is when we sleep, the things, the very subtle things in life that are happening around us constantly and through us and everything that we're not picking up on consciously, that are very clear indicators of very real potential outcomes,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Begin to pour out of us at night. And it can seem like it's prophetic and profound and everything, but it's really just our brain saying, hey, dumbass.
You're talking about Carl Jung right now. Have you heard of Carl Jung before?
Of course, he's the king of that. Yes.
I was just going to say that, like, because I just literally read a quote this morning, how people will have things constantly show up in their life and like, it's fate. And it's like, no, it's your subconscious. It's your subconscious playing out the same thing over and over again. You're like, oh, it's fate. And it's like, no, it's exactly what you're talking about. Incredible.
Excuse me. I love that you said that, because I think when we do that, when we say, oh, it's fate, it's fate, it's fate, I think that gives away our power in that moment. In my mind, I'm not trying to, if that works for you, that's great. Everybody has to find what works for them. But I also think, the intentionality of the life that we create and owning everything. And listen, I'm no genius when it comes to that, right? There's still a lot of things in my life that I'm sort of struggling with, in denial of, that I'm giving up the power to maintain, manage, right?
Yes.
But for me, when I do write these things down, it's pretty profound the way I can put the pieces together and realize, oh wait, that didn't just happen to me. I co-created that, right? The series of things happened, and I acted on those things, even though I wasn't aware of what those things really were, or you know what I mean? So I don't know. Yeah, there's a lot to be said about that. I couldn't agree with you more. And Carl Jung, yay.
Incredible. Yeah, there's a like a 14-week Carl Jung mystery school that I keep getting, because what you talk about, this better than I do, but like when you talk about things and your notification or your Instagram can hear you and you start getting ads for like what it is that you're talking about. I've been getting hit, and I have a link on my phone. It's I'll pull it up right now. It's Carl Jung's 14-week mystery school to go deep into the teachings and learning of Carl Jung.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
And I'm thinking about doing it. It's the Jungian Mystery School, 14-week program led by an international faculty of senior philosophers and psychoanalysts. It like just disappeared. Oh, it's reloading on the intersection of Jungian philosophy, our psychology, and the mystical tradition. And so,
that's great. It's like the best of both worlds.
Yes.
Like
yes.
How much is it?
I think it's like, let me see real quick. It wasn't bad. Oh, okay. So it's a single payment of $700.
Oh,
it's for 14 weeks.
That's
so
great.
$50 a week, which is super inexpensive. Or 4 monthly payments of $200. So if you break it up into 4 monthly payments, you pay an extra $100, basically.
The installment plan, right? Can you send me the link? That's awesome. That's cool.
Done. I'm gonna. If you do it, I'll do it. You want to do it together?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it
together. That just happened here on the show. Okay.
Oh my God! I'm gonna get us T-shirts. Carl Jung T-shirts.
I actually named my business 46&2 Wealth Partners partly after a philosophy of his work, where his shadow work.
Oh.
And 46&2 is a song I heard from a band named Tool many years ago. And they're tapped in, they're on the path of spirituality, consciousness awakening, all these different things. And Carl Jung's work with the shadow talks about the repressed side of your psyche and things that could play out negatively in your life. And part of that song talks about working through your shadow to get to the other side, to get to the healthy side.
Wow.
That's partly one of the reasons why I named my company 46&2. Also, 46&2 is the idea of the next step in human evolution from where we are now, from this disharmonious, broken state of humanity to coming together and evolving and becoming unified consciousness. That's another reason why I named that. But anyway, so jumping to your company, jumping to your business and your expertise, you mentioned a few different things outside of AI, but I have a couple questions about AI I want to talk about, and then your experience with it. I was listening to a Joe Rogan podcast last year where Elon Musk was on, and he scared the shit out of me because he's a fatalist. He believes that he believes that AI has gone too far, and eventually it's going to be Skynet and Terminator, where they're just killing us.
Yeah.
And so whether that happens or not, it's yet to be seen. And I know you have thoughts on this, but talk to us a little bit about AI, the state of AI, what it's doing, where it's going, the benefits, the negatives. Like, give us some context and then tell us how you operate in that space.
Oh, that's a great question. There's so much there. So when let me just say that in 2016, when I came up with the idea, this will probably give you more context than you
I
possibly
love
need.
it.
But it tells you a lot what I think about AI. So in 2016, in June, I'm eating cereal in my pajamas, all right? Doing me.
The best way
And
to eat cereal.
that's why I eat cereal. By the way, since the pandemic, I can't eat cereal. I don't know what that's all about. But
That's
anyway,
probably a good thing.
it is. I know, right? So I'm sitting here eating cereal and I'm reading the news and I come across an article. I think it was in Forbes or Fortune, probably Forbes, that was co-authored by Sebastian Throne and Google's former chairman Eric Schmidt, right? And the article was basically their rebuttal to tech dystopianists. Now they are tech utopianists, right? They believe that AI is going to create a world where it's going to be harmonious and
Yes.
beautiful, everything. It was pretty much a response to Elon Musk and the late Ethan Hawking, right, who are tech dystopianists. And the entire article, it pissed me off so much, I can't even begin to tell you. The entire article, the attitude was basically, stop with this nonsense. You're being ridiculous. They almost said that. Like they were very, in no uncertain terms, they were basically saying, you all are being ridiculous, questioning us about AI. How dare you? How dare you? Just stop it. This is nonsense. We are building the future, right? They go into their spiel. We're going to create millions of jobs. It's going to be amazing, right? So they go through this whole thing. And as I'm reading it paragraph by paragraph, I'm getting more and more pissed off. And that, believe it or not, was the initial impetus for me launching Tech 2025. And the reason, even to this day, when I go back to that moment and why it infuriated me, and to the point where I felt like I had to do something, right? Because there's passive anger and then there's anger that pushes us to action, right? Was that it was so arrogant, right? I am a technologist, right? I believe in the beauty of I believe in the potential and the beauty of technology. I believe that it can do all kinds of wonderful things to help us be better, to understand ourselves. But the tech utopianists like them, and the fact that they are the ones developing the technologies, right? It made me realize, boy, the arrogance with which this technology is being developed, the audacity of them to say, don't question us. And the insistence of them to not consider that just maybe this shit won't work the way we say it will, okay? Made me realize right then and there, as I'm eating my cereal, oh God, we are fucked. And so that was my initial that was my real introduction with regards to AI, my initial feelings about that. Add on top of that, the fact that, because going back to Eric Schmidt, when you think about it, yes, millions of jobs may be created. If we are going to have a utopia, we're going to have to go through hell to get it, right? Since when is utopia easy, right? So there's going to be a lot of people who will fall through the cracks, who we need to help. We can mitigate a lot of pain if we just prepare for what's going to come. But if you don't even consider it, then we're all screwed, right? So anyway, the other thing that happened, three things happened. The other thing was my clients from Surfresh Media, remember, these are enterprise companies, began asking me, these are C-suite executives, Charlie, what the hell is going on with this AI machine learning, right? Because this was 2016, it was still early. They knew what it was, but they kind of didn't, and no one was really talking about it. And they said, how are we going to prepare our organizations for what's going to come? Like, intuitively, everyone knew this was the game changer. And how do we change what's our organizations, whatever. Okay. The other thing, and this is huge, that really, going to your point, that was the year that Trump became president. Okay. And in November, 2 days after he was elected, right? Do you remember that time period that everybody was just shocked? Everyone was shocked. Even Trump was shocked that he won. What the hell? Yeah. And so I went to a tech conference. I was asked to come by the organizer, called Techonomy. And Techonomy is a quarterly publication. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's a quarterly publication. It's geared more towards tech and business executives, okay? Quarterly, and they do events, right, for tech and business leaders. And so the event takes place out in Half Moon Bay in San Francisco. Some of the biggest companies, brands in the world, their executives go to this event. So I was asked to attend, and I knew the organizers, whatever. This is where Mark Zuckerberg made his famous statement about Facebook potentially being damaging or liable for what happened in the election, the Russian interference and everything.
Cambridge Analytics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He was maybe 10, 15 feet in front of me when he was asked that question. Is Facebook somewhat culpable for what happened during this election with regards to the Russian interference and hacking and everything in the Cambridge Analytica? And he literally said, you remember, no way. No way. And to this day, he said he regrets that. He has said repeatedly that he regrets that. Now, I'm going to tell you what I saw through the lens of my mobile camera as I was recording it, and through the lens of being a Black woman sitting there looking at him. Again, to harken back to Eric and Sebastian Throne earlier that year, I watched him, his micro expression. When you can read someone's micro, there are things that we do with our faces that we don't even realize. When David Kirkpatrick, who was the one who invited me to the conference, by the way, when David Kirkpatrick interviewed him and asked him that question, he literally bristled and his face it was almost as if he was disgusted. Like, how dare you ask that question? There's no way Facebook could have had anything to do with it, right? That was that moment that I definitely said, okay, that's it. Literally at that conference, I announced that Tech 2025 was going to come about.
It's Frankenstein's monster. It's you've built this technology and you can't control it. Like you've stolen fire from the gods, and now it's a matter of like harnessing the power without letting it get out of control.
Right, and the arrogance of not realizing that things can get out of control. You see, but that's Silicon Valley, right? Yeah. That's that move fast and break shit, right? That's right. Of like, I got this, my balls are bigger than yours, I can do this. You can also destroy the world. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but we need to build these things into place. And so it's then that I realized we've got to get people up to speed. We've got to get people, now, Web 2.0, we didn't do too well. Meaning we did great in terms of the technologies that we created, but we didn't do well, meaning it wasn't democratized. Only a few made money, only a few got the funding. 5 companies now run the world. And so we have to get ordinary people understanding that, number one, understanding what this stuff is, what AI is and what it isn't, right? Separating the noise from what's really there.
Yeah.
And then also realizing that, and this is for the executives too, this is where they come in. If you don't get ordinary people, your employees, the rest of society on board with creating, with developing, with deploying these technologies, then we will create something that can destroy us, right? So that's been the ethos of Tech 2025, is that it must be inclusive and it must be grounded in understanding that there's there's a number of ways this could play out, but understanding that we need to also focus on the other possibilities. So when we say we're going to implement AI, my question to my audience and to my clients or whatever they're doing is, at what cost?
So the question is this is from a lay person who's learning about this on the outside looking in, but can AI become sentient and or decide that it doesn't need human life? Human life is basically in the way for its goals, kind of thing. Is that possible? Like what Elon believes to be possible, is this possible?
It's possible. Anything's possible, right? I don't want to sound like I'm, but that's what I've always believed. I always operate under the idea that listen, look at the last 4 years, 5 years of our lives, right? Things happen that we didn't think could have ever possibly have happened. We operate in these technologies, and innovation itself moves forward and actually propels into the stratosphere with the idea that anything could happen.
Yeah.
And let's be real, that's kind of what titillates us, right? That's what excites us. It's the potential of what can happen. The problem is that we look at the potential for that sentient AI, that self-aware AI to be good. And even when we consider for a split second that, well, maybe it won't be so good. After all, we have 50, 60, 70 years of sci-fi movies that have questioned whether or not it's good. It's not like we don't have, we know.
Yeah.
We know intuitively that it could, as they say, shit can go wrong really quickly and really badly, right? But we still won't do anything to stop that, right? So no matter what you say about the potential of AI to do harm to us, our potential to do harm to ourselves far exceeds
It's
that.
always been that way. You know, it's always, we destroy ourselves first and foremost. It's just kind of just how it plays out. But what about Neuralink? Have you heard anything about Neuralink and the possibilities of human augmentation to be almost superhuman? Like, what are some of your thoughts around Neuralink?
You know, it's very interesting. I mean, that the technology itself is not new. Here's what I tell people about that. And about all of this stuff that you hear about in the media and that Tech 2025 with the public, when we have events for, you know, the general public and we talk about these things. And even with clients, I always say, you know, you have how the media interprets it, right? Clickbait, and then you have the reality of it.
Right.
When you have these conversations about emerging technologies that are really still exotic, right? Meaning, ooh, what's that? Ooh, look at the business model first, okay? Put the technology aside and look at the business model. Look at where the money is coming from, where it's going, and how they are projecting they are going to make money off of this technology.
Yep.
And there you're going to find almost every answer to every question you have about the technology.
Such as life and business, follow the money. You know?
Follow the money and understand how they're projecting they are going to get a return on that money. Okay. So with Neuralink, there's some problems there now. People don't know this business-wise, and even with regards to the scientists that are developing you know, there's a lot of problems. There's a lot of pushback, even with the scientists who are developing it or who have something to do with it. The promise of the technology is that it can help people who are paralyzed, who are, you know, incapacitated. What's the incapacitated? That's the promise of it, right?
Yes,
The potential of it, the true potential of it is what we're concerned about. But I think based on what I know is there, we're pretty far from that right now. But back to my original point, we should be having those conversations now and putting into place systems and legislation that allows us to sort of watch what's happening and put guardrails on it so that we can understand and so that ordinary people can understand. So to that point, while Elon Musk goes on his tour and he's promoting this stuff and he's like, yay, you know, that's all great. But we need to bring in the legislators. We need to bring in the organizations, the consumer advocacy organization. I know it's early, but it really isn't, right? Because at the end of the day, Neuralink is a more extreme version of this.
Yes.
Right. And so when it comes to teaching people about the potential of the exotic technologies to do good or to do harm, it helps to let them know we already have the technology here. It's just in a rudimentary form, but we use it every day. We're using something that's wiring our brain to think differently every day. It goes back to awareness. So yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there to answer your question. I think we should be more concerned about, number one, educating people on what it is and what it isn't. Because Elon just, you know, he wants to sell. He's got a business to run.
He's a market maker. He can make stocks go up and down with one tweet.
Yes, and exactly. And listen, we're humans, right? We love a good narrative. You know, you can change the whole world with a powerful narrative. Okay. What I would suggest is that when we consider the source, right? Elon tells a great narrative. He tells a great story, but then follow the money. Look at what's going on and where it's coming from. And yeah.
Age old wisdom is follow the money. What about Tech 2025? What's on deck this year? Anything you're looking forward to this year or in the next 18 months?
Yeah. Yes, a lot of stuff. Thank you so much for asking. So really excited. We're rolling out new services. We are doing definitely continuous learning courses with our clients, which is really important. The whole idea around upskilling and reskilling in these companies is based primarily on technology upskilling in terms of understanding the hard tech, which is important. It's really important. What we are focused on, as always, since day one, is on understanding, number one, how employees need to learn the soft skills, right? Which is important. But then also there are millions of jobs that are supposed to be created over the next several years, right? Through to 2025. I dare you to name at least 5 of them, right? Like, it's like no one really knows what's coming. So what we do with companies now, what I'm really excited about with some of the employee engagement programs that we have, is we are teaching employees how to become more adept at forecasting the technological future. Okay, so this forecasting, which is really important, right? What's coming and what's not. Some of the questions that you asked just now, right? I'll give you an example. We have events coming up, and as a matter of fact, this week on forecasting, I'll give you the link. And next week, we have an event called Jobs of the Future. If software is eating the world, who's going to feed the beast? Yeah, no, everybody likes that title.
Really cool, yeah.
I have to, yeah. And it's about the fact that companies are at the point now where they're doing what we said they should be doing since 2017. Back in 2017, I was telling them, if you want to get your organizations ready for what's to come, you have to be ready to do bottom-up innovation, right? You've got to democratize the innovation process and everything. And they weren't prepared to do that then. But now, I think Gartner and a lot of the analysts are saying that by 2025, companies will have created 500 million apps, wow. Most of them powered by AI. The way that they're going to do this, because who's going to build it, right? This is what the event is about next week. Who's going to do that? Well, now they realize that there's not enough software engineers in the world, okay? Literally. There's a glut of software engineers. There's not enough tech talent to develop these technologies, not enough engineers, programmers, or anything. In the pipeline coming from schools, there's just not enough. Wow. So the demand, in order to meet the demand of building 500 million apps, they really now have to rely on employees.
Oh, wow, okay.
So if you do that, which you will, the question then becomes, how do you do that so that it's equitable? How do you do that so that employees get out of it what they put into it, right? And really, what does that mean to put the power of developing AI-powered apps into the hands of employees, right? That changes your culture. It changes everything, actually. So we're working with companies on that too, which I'm really excited about, because that's sort of the realization of what I launched initially with Tech 2025, which is you can't do it without ordinary people and employees who are under you. You have to bring them in on the process and make them partners. So that's really exciting. So our programs are great around that. I can talk forever about that, but that's primarily what we're doing now with companies. So
oh yeah, and we definitely, you and I are going to run this back another episode for that reason, to talk more about Tech 2025, but also to talk about horror movies and everything else that we want to talk about.
Horror movies, that's my passion.
What exactly?
And also one more thing I forgot to tell you, just really important regarding Tech 2025. So I spoke more about the company end of this, but we work with individuals too. So you can join the Tech 2025 community, and we do tons of events. We have courses, classes, everything like that. We have discussion groups. We have our portal, our little back channel for having these conversations. And we also help people to understand how to think about the industry and job searches and everything like that. So
beautiful. You're leaving the world a better place than you found it. What's going to happen in tech in 2026? Do you have to do some rebranding?
Everybody says that. Can I just say that? Everyone asks that question. Let me tell you what I'm going to do. All right. By the way, 2025, everyone's, why did you pick that year? Well, because that year is it turns out other people are thinking this too, meaning that analysts and everything, but 2025 is a tipping point of sorts, right? There's so many technologies that are being developed simultaneously, emerging technologies. They're colliding, they're developing together. And it's accelerating. That by that point, it's kind of like, if you're not on board the train, you're going to get run over by it, right? Yeah. Like that's okay. So 2026, you know what's going to happen? We're going to move on. 2030, 2035. What the hell? It doesn't stop.
For the next 5 years.
Well, you know what? Yeah, and it's so funny because when I launched this, 2025 seems so. It was 8 years ahead. I'm like, yeah, we got time. Meanwhile, my partners, like people, my business associates and advisors, they're like, okay, you got to get Tech 2035 and Tech 2020, and I'm like, dude, okay, it's all good. It'll
take it as it goes.
Let's get there. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. Let me be the first one from the audience and the viewers to say thank you for everything that you dropped a lot of knowledge on us today. You're an amazing human being. I'm excited to be connected with you and see where our journey takes us. We're definitely going to run this back, but she's the amazing, the mighty, the powerful Charlie Oliver. I'm Jesse T. Be sure to catch us on next week's episode of the Jesse T Show.